But that tension between universalism and particularism is real for me. Is it real for you? If I'm particular, am I insulating myself from the richness of universalism? Or am I at risk of narrowing myself and not caring and disconnecting myself from the greater ecology of human spiritual expression and richness? But if I'm universal, am I robbing myself or denying, kind of cutting off those spiritual genes, that DNA that's in me that is begging for expression? Is there a purpose to reconnecting and digging deep into one's own ancestral identity? So last week we talked discussed the concept of ashrei, of the experience of bliss, of wholeness, the experience of full consciousness. And the term ashrei, which literally is translated as you could say happiness. I actually like to refer to ashrei as bliss. But again, we want to hear it in its spiritual, kind of more subtle context. And we'll jump right back into Credo of a Modern Kabbalist by Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi and Rabbi Daniel Siegel. And we're on page 8, and the subtitle of this subchapter is Ashrei in the Grocery Store. A Jewish person who wants to practice in such a way that every part of him or her gets into Ashrei often finds that there is at least one major obstacle to overcome in seeking internal permission to focus on consciousness. Often that obstacle manifests in the form of his or her parents. I'm sure you didn't expect that, did you? But there's such a deep psychological wisdom in that. I think that since Freud opened the floodgates of insight and understanding what we call psychodynamics, so much of our experience, even spiritual, is sort of on the grounds of what's the baggage, what's the, what kind of pack or pekalin in Yiddish are we carrying from our early formative years. I'll continue. Once a young man called me at the beginning of a semester with this problem. This is the voice of Reb Zalman. He told me that he wanted to take my course on the, quote, core texts of Kabbalah, end quote, but that his parents were determined that he not take this course. Their position was that he would be sidetracked by Kabbalah and never finish his undergraduate degree. For all they thought about Kabbalah, he might as well have told them he was going to drop acid. And obviously we're talking here about back in the 60s. In other words, the students' parents were associating the study of Kabbalah with an altered state of consciousness and assumed that their son might lose his mind if he studied it. Apropos, that's not far-fetched, but obviously within context. And the mind that would be lost would be the one which takes you to the grocery store that lets you function in the world. So you hear a voice here of the Jewish pragmatism, or the pragmatist side in Jewish, Jewish tradition, that says, you got to start from the ground up and don't shoot for the stars in a way that's going to basically take you off the path of rootedness, of groundedness, of self-care, of survival. For us Jews, that is so important. And let me continue here with the next sub-chapter titled The Fear of Ashrei. So many people, like this particular student's parents, are afraid. I think that what their fear is really about is that their kids are going to fly away. They are like the mother hen who sat on the duck's egg and sees that duckling go to the water and start swim. Gewalt, she yells. Quote, I sat on those eggs. They can't swim, end quote. But they can swim, and our children can fly even when we, their parents, cannot. It's interesting that people identify Kabbalah in this way. It acknowledges that it is possible to experience Ashrei. So you see that sometimes the resistance affirms that which we're resisting to. Why are you against something? Probably for good reason. But in other words, not the reason that you're so afraid of. Probably there's value in there, but that value somehow is presenting some kind of sense of threat. And I agree that there are many ways of getting to Ashrei, including physics, chemistry, biology, and psychology. Each one of these paths has its own way of ashraying people, as do paths of physical exertion as well. Let me just clarify here, especially if this is your first time coming in on this lesson, is that when Reb Zalman here is talking about Ashrei, he's talking about the spiritual path, about spiritual work, spiritual practice, the cultivation of the skillfulness within Jewish tradition to ascend, to go into states of mind that are expansive, higher states of consciousness. I'll continue with Reb Zalman's words. I know that if I could relate to my muscles in the right way, as Feldenkrais teaches. Feldenkrais was a body-mind centered teacher who developed a method he's an Israeli, Moshe Feldenkrais, and his method is studied. It's a healing method of working through body awareness and light exercise. So again, I know that if I could relate to my muscles the right way, as Feldenkrais teaches, I would be able to tell all the muscles that I'm holding in tension, that are standing at attention. I could tell them, it's okay, relax, stand easy, find the most comfortable position in which gravity is doing more of the work, so that you can settle in that position. That is a very good way of doing Ashrei in the body and in the kishkis, Yiddish for guts. However, for the Jewish seeker who is experiencing Ashrei in a zendo or an ashram, and how many of us have been there? You, me. He or she may find images from a Jewish past arising in consciousness. They may look like a Zaidi, a Bubby, grandparents from the old country. They may be Jewish ritual objects, such as a menorah or a Magen David, Star of David. They arise because they are potent images placed among placed almost at the cellular or genetic levels by generations and generations of Jewish spiritual practitioners. Even if not part of a person's conscious memory, something of the way women used to light Shabbat candles and pray for their families comes through. I'll tell you, I remember, I'm third generation secular. My grandfather rejected Jewish practice. He came from a very Orthodox Hasidic home in the area of Kiev in the Ukraine. So he rejected. My mother after him rejected everything. And I chose to explore Judaism as an adult. But what I do remember is when my grandmother came to live near us towards the end of her life. She had an apartment right in our building, one floor up. And she rejected, she left Russia after pogroms and, rejected everything. Lived her whole life just a plain secular, Jewish life. And towards the end of her life, I would come up on Friday evening and she would be lighting candles. That was the one and only Jewish practice she picked up and continued till she passed away. May her memory be a blessing. And I remember that. My family did not light candles. We were secular all the way, atheistic, none of that nonsense was the motto in my family. So that genetic, that imprint in the DNA of Jewish symbols and ritual and concept that can come up as we sit in the zendo or sit in the meditation, in a meditation group. For many of us, that has been the experience, hasn't it? So let me continue here with Reb Zalman's words. Oy, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the Universe, I am lighting my candles, Lichvod Shabbat, for the honor of the Sabbath. Let there be Shalom Bayis, peace in our home, and harmony in our family. May the Kinderlach children be Ehrliche Yidden, excellent Jews, und wachsen Tzaddikim, and grow into righteous people. I love the Yiddish. I did not grow up with Yiddish, but there's something about that old country language that, sort of the melody of it, has a flavor for those of us who are of Ashkenazi descent, and I'm sure for those of you who are of Sephardi descent, you have your own, memories embedded in your DNA that come from Ladino, come from Arabic, it's a different type. Zeitgeist of Judaism. So here we continue. These blessings were our way of drawing ashrei from that plane where its energy is stored, because their function is no longer clear to the modern seeker. These images and memories appear to be distractions on the path to spiritual consciousness. You see. It's interesting how that works. If you are someone who's meditated or honed skills that come from other traditions or even perennial spirituality, just modern, mindfulness and breathing techniques, etc. And these images come up for you. So how do you hold that? Are those messages from the past? Are those part of your wholesome self that need to be addressed and processed and honored and welcome, or are those sort of like, oh, this is old stuff that's just trying to derail me? It's a very, very important question, right? How do we place, for those of us who are born Jewish but are really universalists, which is, by the way, being a universalist is part of the Jewish questioning anyway. I mean, we're not Jewish for our own sake. We're Jews as light to the nations. We care. Being Jewish doesn't mean anything if we're not somehow gifting the rest of the world caring for the entire body of humanity. I mean, that is Torah. A lot of us forget that. So how do we handle the Jewish spiritual DNA that's in us when it presents itself in the context of wanting to connect with Ashrei, with the spiritual flow? Let me continue with the Rebbe's words. Yet they really are manifestations of the technology of Ashrei from our most recent past, just as the memories of sensual, sexual fertility rites of Asherah, the female fertility goddess, are the manifestations of a much earlier technology of accessing Ashrei. And this is Reb Zalman. You see that he's kind of reminding us that, guess what? Where did we come from? Where do we have our language from? We evolved out of a pagan past, and that past is still part of us. That pagan DNA is still within us, right? So Ashrei is the same root, almost the same word as the goddess Asherah. You hear that? That was a purposeful pun intended. While that approach was replaced by the moral one expressed in the opening verse of Psalms, which I quoted above, its echoes also remain in our modern consciousness. And the psalm that I quoted above, let me just go back to it. I think it's worthwhile. The first psalm, number 1, reads as follows: Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach be'atzat reshaim. Psalm 1. It starts with Ashrei, which is Ashrei ha'ish lo halach be'atzat yesharim. Happy is the person who has not followed the counsel of the wicked. So what Zalman is guiding us towards here is the sort of essential, in the language, for the essential flow of the spiritual information in the human developmental process of seeking and working towards growing and expanding spiritually. So here the metaphor, the thinking, there's probably another way to put it, I'll get to that in a moment, but that there is, when we open up to divine flow, what comes flowing to us is Ashrei. And this describes the experience, as Reb Zalman stated before, the experience of expanded consciousness, of altered states. Remember the parents who were afraid that their child would not graduate college because that would take his mind to places that would distract him from doing what he needs to do so he can function well in the world, aka go to the grocery. That is Ashrei. And then Ashrei also describes the goal, as it were, of spiritual work. Right? So what are we going towards? What do we want to attain as we learn how to meditate and how to pray and how to clear our mind and how to, fine-tune our body and all the different components of spiritual work and development? So you can also call the goal of that work Ashrei. The name of this subchapter here is Universal and Particular, Surfaces and Surfacing. Now we'll conclude with this last topic. So what happens then when these Jewish images begin to rise up to the surface during the meditations of seekers who thought they had left their Judaism behind? It is natural that they would begin to ask, hey, what's going on here? I tried this stuff before and it didn't work. The whole reason why I went elsewhere is because I got so hungry and Judaism didn't satisfy me. Now, when they have shown me something that is really working, the Zendo, the meditation group, the the Sufi zikr, or the the Hindu chanting, the chanting and the meditating, all of a sudden, all this Jewish stuff starts coming online. What then is the next step? How does the seeker work with these images? This is especially difficult and important because here is where the conflict begins, which expresses itself as a fight between the universalism of their other way and the particularism of Judaism. A very real tension. I'm a rabbi. I've committed myself to the Jewish path after I had explored Eastern yoga and meditation and Western self-improvement, and consciousness development, and Sufism and Native American studies. I have committed myself. I have landed. I made the decision that Jewish spirituality is the path within which I'm going to deepen. But that tension between universalism and particularism is real for me. Is it real for you? If I'm particular, am I insulating myself from the richness of universalism? Or am I at risk of narrowing myself and not caring and disconnecting myself from the greater ecology of human spiritual expression and richness? But if I'm universal, am I robbing myself or denying, kind of cutting off those spiritual genes, that DNA that's in me that is begging for expression? Is there a purpose to reconnecting and digging deep into one's own ancestral identity? And the tension is real. All the other religions to which seekers are exposed claim to be universal language, while Judaism appears to be mired in particularism. If the spiritual practice now being interrupted by Jewish images has emphasized that not only humankind but all sentient beings live to reach divine realization, then how could seekers justify reconnecting with the spiritual path in practice, which seems so narrowly focused on only one people? What a good question. What a real question. Very alive. I would bet it's alive for you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, by the way. Please leave comments below. Let's keep interacting. We're going to close this lesson here. Obviously, we're going to walk away with this delicious question. This is the meditation for the week. I am so grateful that reading this text is stirring up that question. This is an ongoing exploration for me. I hope it is for you. So with that, I'm gonna close, and would love to hear your thoughts. How do you handle the tension between particularism and universalism? Are you a seeker of Ashrei, or of higher states of consciousness? Are you a spiritual seeker? Do you fall more on the particularism? And feel that you prioritize your loyalty to Judaism? Or do you fall on the side of universalism, where your loyalty is really to all humanity, and you approach Judaism with a certain cautiousness? Where are you on that spectrum? How do you resolve it? Have you found a balance? How is that going? Let's share, folks. I want to invite you to comment below. That is going to be it for today. Let us all be blessed that we can walk tall and strong and open and sensitive to having those questions resolve gradually such that we can be empowered. So whatever we do, wherever we're hedging ourselves, wherever we're investing our seeking and spiritual growth energy, we are just taking more energy and more clarity and more forward motion, more stillness, deeper stillness, just from tossing around these questions of the tension between universalism and Jewish particularism. May we so be blessed. May we walk into this day with just more light, more clarity, more strength and inspiration on our path. I'm Rabbi Ruben Modik with Hebrew Learning Circles and Makom Halev Community here in Nyack, New York. Please, if you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Hebrew Learning Circles. If you're watching us on Facebook, still subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's clicking that red button on the bottom right, usually of the YouTube frame. Like us and subscribe. Come back. We're going to be reading through this book, Credo of a Modern Kabbalist, just page after page after page. We have about 350 more pages to go. Lots of rich inspiration in there. If you're in the New York area, please drop a note or drop by. Let's connect. I look forward to the next time. Have a blessed day.